The first bullet tore through her shoulder before she even had a chance to scream. Officer Maya Jackson staggered back against the rusted fence of the junkyard, blood soaking into her uniform, her gun clattering uselessly to the gravel. The moonlight flickered off the badges of the 4 officers surrounding her, men she'd once shared coffee with, backed up in shootouts, trusted with her life. Now they stared at her like she was a problem they needed to erase. Please. The first bullet tore through her shoulder before she even had a chance to scream. Officer Maya Jackson staggered back against the rusted fence of the junkyard, blood soaking into her uniform, her gun clattering uselessly to the gravel. The moonlight flickered off the badges of the 4 officers surrounding her, men she'd once shared coffee with, backed up in shootouts, trusted with her life. Now they stared at her like she was a problem they needed to erase. Please, she rasped, clutching her side. I have the files. I already sent them. Another shot cracked the silence, shattering her kneecap. She collapsed in agony. You should have kept your mouth shut, Maya, one of them muttered, voice low. Detached. She dragged herself forward, bloodied fingers clawing at the dirt. People need to know what you did. I didn't come to ruin you, came to save the badge. One of them crouched beside her. He pressed a silencer to her forehead and whispered, you think justice cares about you? A final shot. The screen on David Jackson's phone lit up in the darkness of his study. He hadn't opened a message from her since she left the precinct hours ago, but this one, no words, just a shaky video loaded slowly. He leaned closer. The camera was pinned sideways, but the voices were unmistakable. The gunshots, the screams, hers. His chest seized. Then came her voice, faint and trembling. David, if you're seeing this, they found me. Don't stop. Bring the truth to light. I love you. The screen went black, and in that silence, something inside him fractured beyond repair. The phone slipped from David Jackson's hand and clattered to the floor, the echo ricocheting through the silence of the study like a final gunshot. He didn't move, not right away. The image of Maya's face, bloodied, defiant, terrified, was seared into his mind as if it had been tattooed on the back of his eyelids. But that was now. 2 days earlier. The world had still made sense. Babe, how many eggs did you just use? Maya asked, peeking over his shoulder with a smirk. David stood at the stove, shirtless, humming Marvin Gaye while scrambling a comically large pile of eggs in a pan. All of them. Protein is the secret to a happy retirement. She leaned against the counter, still in her uniform pants and a tank top, her badge clipped to her hip. Her curls were still damp from the shower. She looked tired but beautiful, always beautiful. You were a CIA operative, not a linebacker, she teased. And yet, he said, lifting the pan with flair, I'm still cooking you breakfast. She smiled, softer now, stepping close. Because you love me, because I love you, he echoed, kissing her forehead. They ate together at the kitchen island, the sun casting golden light across the marble countertop. Outside birds chirped. Their world felt intact. So, he started, how about that trip to Barbados? I already checked with Aiden to house it. Maya poked at her eggs, hesitant. I want to, she said quietly. God, I need it. But something's going on at the precinct. Something big. David frowned. You're off duty. Can't it wait? She shook her head. I can't shake the feeling it's about to blow wide open. Officers are deleting body cam footage. Reports are being scrubbed, and yesterday she hesitated. Internal Affairs tried to pin a missing person case on a rookie I know is clean. David leaned forward, concern tightening his jaw. I pulled the logs, she continued. There are 4 names that keep showing up around these incidents. Always at the scene. Always in control of the narrative. But when I ask questions, doors close. Phones go silent. You're getting too close, he warned. She met his eyes. So I should walk away? No, but I know what dirty systems do to clean people. I've seen it firsthand. I don't want to lose you. You won't, she whispered, reaching for his hand. I'm not reckless. I've been documenting everything. If something happens, it won't die with me. He squeezed her hand, torn between admiration and fear. You're brave. Braver than I ever was. But I need you to promise me something, she smiled. You're about to say something emotionally manipulative, aren't you? Promise me, he said softly, you'll tell me if it gets dangerous. Her smile faltered. Okay, but neither of them believed that promise would hold. That afternoon they visited her sister's place, laughed, played with their nephew in the backyard, took pictures, the kind you never know will become the last. That night they danced in the living room to old records. Maya in her sweatpants, David in socks and jeans, both of them spinning in the golden hue of a floor lamp and vinyl static, rested her head on his shoulder. You know, after all the things we've seen, this is the part that doesn't feel real. What part? The peace. He kissed her temple, Then let's protect it. And for a moment the world was still, but peace, like all fragile things, is never built to last. The next morning, Maya woke up before the sun. David felt her slip out of bed, soft footsteps. Across hardwood, he pretended to sleep, eyes half shut, watching her silhouette move through the room, gun holstered, jacket zipped, badge clipped, her ritual. She paused by the door, looked back at him, then vanished into the dark. He would never see her alive again. Maya's mind was a battlefield of names and time. Over the past 3 months, she had connected a string of missing persons, drug seizures that never made it to evidence lockup, and suspect fatalities that all had one thing in common. For white officers from her own department, Mick, Vaigh Rourke, Daniels, Brennan, decorated, untouchable, and deadly, they operated like shadows, always arriving first on a scene, writing the reports, burying the truth beneath bureaucratic language and falsified logs. Maya knew she was onto something massive, but she needed more, hard evidence, something they couldn't spin or erase. In the quiet solitude of her precinct office, she stared at her screen. Body cam footage marked corrupted, dispatch logs altered after the fact, autopsy reports with redacted details. But then she found it, a series of CCTV clips not yet flagged or deleted. One showed McVeigh escorting a cuffed suspect into an alley, moments before the man disappeared from the system completely. Another showed Daniels exchanging a thick envelope with someone inside an unmarked car. The plates led to a property listed under a shell company with ties to cartel money. Maya's hands trembled. This was it. She copied everything to a secure drive and slid it into a flash key she wore beneath her uniform. Not the cloud, not this time. She'd learned the hard way how easily things vanished online. She needed to tell someone. She called Officer Lena Brooks, her closest friend on the force, someone she had mentored for years. "You sure about this?" Lena asked over coffee later. That day, glancing nervously around the small diner, "They've crossed every line," Maya said. "This isn't just corruption, it's murder, it's trafficking. People are disappearing, Lena, and it's coming from inside our house." Lena hesitated, then nodded. "You have to go to They're compromised. I'm going public. I'm giving it to an independent journalist I trust, someone who can't be bought." Lena reached across the table, gripping her wrist. "Be careful, Maya. Promise me you won't do anything alone." Maya smiled faintly. Too late. That evening the signs started. A black SUV idled too long across the street. A call dropped suddenly mid-conversation. Her laptop froze, then rebooted, on its own. When she entered her car after her shift, her glove compartment was open and she never left it that way. Still, she pressed forward. She made the call to the journalist, an encrypted line. A time and location arranged. Tomorrow, noon, the handoff. But night she didn't come home. David tried not to worry. He assumed paperwork ran late. Or maybe she crashed at her sister's. But as the hours passed and the silence thickened, an old instinct stirred in him. The one he thought he buried when he retired. The next morning, David found the flash drive hidden in the air vent of her study. She must have placed it there as a fail-safe. It was labeled for. He plugged it in. Folders, video clips, names, incident reports, and then the last entry, a video message, recorded only hours before. "Maya Jackson," she said, voice steady, eyes hard. "If this message is playing, I'm either dead or off the grid. I've found evidence of illegal operations inside our department for officers connected to at least 10 missing persons, multiple homicides, and internal sabotage. I've shared this with one contact I trust. If this drive gets out, they won't be able to hide anymore. And if I'm gone," she hesitated. "David, I love you, I'm sorry. Please finish what I started." Her voice cracked on the last word. He sat frozen, every breath like glass in his lungs. 30 minutes later his phone vibrated. Unknown number. Video attachment. He opened it. The image was sideways, grainy but unmistakable. Maya, on her knees in a gravel lot, surrounded, pleading, "Please. I already sent it." Gunshots. Then silence. David didn't scream. He didn't cry, he simply shut down. The man who had buried enemies in deserts, dismantled dictatorships, and walked away from torture chambers, now faced a pain he could not process. He closed the laptop, took the flash drive, and stood in the center of their living room where they'd once danced, where peace had felt possible. His world was gone, but they were still out there, and now he had a mission. David didn't bury her with a flag, he buried her with her badge. The sky above the cemetery was overcast, heavy like a grieving mother. Rain drizzled in thin sheets over black umbrellas, muted prayers, and the hollow thud of earth hitting wood. Maya's casket was polished walnut, her name etched in silver. Maya Elaine Jackson, 197922025. Truth has no fear. David stood alone at the edge of the grave, hands in the pockets of his black coat, eyes dry but hollow. Her sister wept nearby. A few fellow officers showed up silent, guilty, cowards, wrapped in blue. No honor guard. No 21-gun salute. They called it an off-duty incident. He called it murder. That night he opened the whiskey bottle Maya had gifted him on their anniversary 2 years ago. He hadn't touched it before, said it was too expensive to waste on anything but a celebration. But now there was nothing left to celebrate. The burn in his throat wasn't enough to distract from the memories, not from the sounds, not from the image of her falling, of her begging. The video played on repeat in his mind, each frame a branding iron against his soul. He couldn't sleep. He didn't want to, because every time he closed his eyes he wasn't in the living room anymore. He was in Fallujah. He was in a Bolivian prison cell. He was in a dark, silent hallway in Moldova, standing over a man who didn't get to scream before the wire choked his breath. But back then he had control. Death made sense. Now he was helpless, drunk, and broken, and Maya was gone. He stopped answering calls, pushed away friends, slept on the couch. Her scent still lingered on the pillows in the bedroom, and he couldn't survive that. He stared at the flash drive for hours each day, digging through folders, notes, case files. She hadn't finished cataloging. It was enough to know they were dirty, but not enough to bury them. Then one day, while re-watching one of the security clips, he noticed something he'd missed. Daniels, one of the four, was smoking near a marked cruiser in the corner of the screen. The timestamp was wrong. The incident report said he was across town at a domestic call. Sloppy. David set up. The old instincts twitched in his spine. The pieces shifted. Patterns emerged. In the agency. This was called threading the wire, finding the tug in the chaos that unraveled the whole web. Daniels was his thread. He started walking the streets again, visiting precinct-adjacent bars, listening. Quietly, no mention of Maya, just a grizzled ex-fed making small talk with uniforms too drunk to guard their tongues. Daniels, nah, he's a creep. Man thinks he's untouchable. I heard IA drop the report. Scared off, maybe. Didn't he just buy a boat? A boat. David found it docked at a private marina off a highway bridge. Sleek, expensive, paid for in cash. According to a port clerk, no name, no registration number that matched local records. Inside, hidden beneath a false panel, he found a black duffel bag, 2 burner phones, a Glock with a scratched-out serial number, and a small journal with GPS coordinates and cash movement notes. Cryptic, fragmented, but real. Proof. His hand shook as he held the journal. For the first time in weeks, he felt something other than pain, but with it came something darker, older, something he had buried with his badge and agency clearance. Vengeance. He brought the bag home and laid it all out on the dining table. One side of his mind, the operative, started forming a plan, names, routines, weaknesses, surveillance, angles. The other side, the man Maya loved, hesitated. She wanted truth, exposure, justice through light, not blood. But the system had already failed her. He stared at her picture on the mantel. The one from their trip to Seattle, her laughing at something off camera. The wind catching her curls. I don't know what you'd want me to do anymore, he whispered. I don't know if I can be that man. His phone buzzed. Blocked number. Voicemail. He played it. A voice, distorted by wind. You need to stop digging or you'll end up next to her. Click. David closed his eyes, jaw clenched so tight his molars ached. They weren't just watching, they were waiting, daring him to come. He called an old contact from the agency, Briggs, a fixer, retired, like him, but with one foot still in the shadows. I'm not asking for a hit, David said. I just need gear, access, and silence. Briggs didn't ask why. He never had to. Same protocols. Better. I'm outnumbered. A pause. This personal. David's voice cracked. She was my whole goddamn life. That night he returned to the grave. No umbrella, just rain. He knelt in front of her headstone, soaked to the bone, and whispered like she could still hear him. I tried the high road. I did. But they erased you like you were nothing, and I can't let that stand. He placed the journal on the ground. You always believed in justice. He wiped his face, not knowing if it was rain or tears. I'm going to give it to you, one way or another. And somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled low and inevitable. The rain hadn't let up by morning. David sat in his truck across from the precinct's back lot. The windows fogged, engines silent. He stared through the windshield at the officers, laughing near the patrol cars. He recognized every face. Most of them were just doing their job, but 4 didn't laugh, didn't flinch. They moved with practiced commonwealths in uniform, the men who killed his wife. He studied them one by one, each with their own rhythm, each with blood on their hands. Number 1. Michael McVeigh, the enforcer. He walked with a limp and old shrapnel wound from Fallujah, or so the rumors went. Broad-shouldered, jaw like concrete, eyes always scanning. McVeigh had seen real war, and he never came back from it. There was a time when he was the department's hero, Bronze Star, Marine Recon, handed a badge like it was a new rifle, but war had twisted him. Years ago, at a dive bar just outside city limits, McVeigh sat with Daniels and Brennan after a late shift. A news report flickered on the TV. Another unarmed suspect gunned down by police in another city. McVeigh scoffed, raising his beer. Better them than us. Public's eating it alive, Daniels said, tapping his glass. They don't get it, McVeigh muttered. When you're in the shit, it's kill or be killed. Doesn't matter if it's Kabul or 5th Street. He slammed his drink. You hesitate, you die. He saw every street as a war zone, every suspect as an enemy combatant. He didn't protect civilians, he patrolled territory. Maya once wrote him up for excessive force. The report was buried. Within days. McVeigh didn't believe in justice. He believed in control. Number 2. Daniel Rourke, the survivor. You wouldn't notice Rourke unless you were looking for him. Thin frame, always pale, a constant twitch in his left hand. He was the one always talking about doing what we have to do. What most didn't know was that Rourke had a son with leukemia, medical bills towering into 6 figures, a mortgage drowning him, a wife halfway out the door. He was a man being crushed slowly, and he didn't scream, he just started making deals. Cash seizures never made it to the evidence room. His patrol reports left out critical timelines. He pocketed what he thought he deserved, in a parking lot, behind the courthouse. He once sat in his car, hands trembling on the wheel, staring at a photo of his son in a hospital bed. He had just handed off an evidence bag to a man in a suit. Cash for silence. He whispered to himself, this isn't evil, this is survival. But corruption doesn't make room for morality. Eventually, survival becomes justification, and justification becomes doctrine. Rourke convinced himself the world owed him, and when Maya started asking questions, he saw her as a threat to his family. Number 3. Curtis Brennan, the manipulator. Brennan was the smooth one, slick hair, cufflinks on his uniform sleeves, always flirting with dispatchers and quoting obscure Supreme Court rulings like punchlines. He was a sociopath with a clipboard, a man who didn't care about guilt or innocence, only about what could be spun. To him, the badge wasn't a symbol of duty, it was a license to play chess with human lives. He had a background in criminal law but couldn't hack it in the courtroom, so he joined the force, figuring it would be easier to control the system from the inside. At a precinct poker night, Brennan leaned across the table to Daniels and said, the whole world's just about perception. You put a guy in cuffs, the public already thinks he's guilty. We write the reports, we frame the narrative. It's beautiful. Daniels chuckled. You ever think we'll get caught? Only if someone honest shows up. That someone was Maya. Brennan saw her integrity not as a threat, but as a flaw. He tried to dissuade her at first, friendly suggestions, subtle deflections. But when that didn't work, he helped orchestrate her silence. He wasn't a killer, he was worse. Number 4. Jack Daniels, the ringleader, tall, handsome, a voice that could command a room or calm a riot. Jack Daniels wasn't just a copy, was the future of the department. Community outreach, medals, TV appearances, politicians on speed dial, but behind the polished image was a man who knew exactly how far the rot could spread before it reached the surface. He wasn't corrupt by accident, he engineered it. Where Brennan manipulated language, Daniels manipulated people. He knew how to make the brass look the other way, how to pit officers against each other, how to erase a threat without getting his hands dirty. Years ago, during a recruitment seminar, Daniels pulled aside a new cadet who questioned a user force exercise. He smiled, charming as always, and said, you want to make change? Do it from inside, but don't confuse morality with strategy. Sometimes the system needs wolves to keep the sheep in line. He recruited McVeigh, protected Rourke, gave Brennan leash to maneuver, and when Maya discovered the truth, he didn't panic. He planned. He made her death look like a rogue incident, filed under chaos, and spun the media until it was forgotten by Monday. But he made one mistake. He didn't account for her husband. From across the street, David watched them part ways after their shift. Daniels shook hands with the chief, smiled for a photo with a local reporter, then slid into a black SUV. McVeigh lit a cigarette and drove off alone. Rourke made a quick call. David zoomed in with a long lens. His lips moved quickly, agitated. Brennan disappeared behind a side door, likely heading to the evidence locker. David took notes. Logged patterns. He had been trained to infiltrate warlords, dismantle cartels. This was no different, but part of him still searched for weakness, not in their routine, in their humanity, and he saw flickers Rourke's haunted eyes when he glanced. At a playground, McVeigh's limp turning into a limp and a wince, Brennan's glance in a mirror that lasted a second too long. Even Daniel's shaking hands seemed almost weary, but none of it mattered, because they didn't hesitate when they pulled the trigger. And now, it was David's turn to stop hesitating. David sat in his garage, surrounded by blueprints, maps, burner phones, and fragments of his old self. The faint hum of a space heater buzzed in the background, but he didn't feel the warmth. Instead, he felt cold, methodical, the way he used to feel right before a sanctioned kill. But this wasn't sanctioned. This wasn't war. This was something else. This was personal. Maya's flash drive sat in the center of the table like an altar. Every detail she'd uncovered, every thread she'd followed, was now his responsibility, his burden. He studied the 4 names: McVeigh, Rourke, Brennan, Daniels. He drew a line under Daniels' name, the last one, the root. But before the head of the snake, you cut the tail. He called in the first favor from Briggs. I need a new identity, David said. No paper trail, something clean but flexible, and I'll need go old school. No digital. Briggs didn't ask why. 2 days later, David received a package in the dead drop, a Texas driver's license with the name Adam Keller, a nondescript handgun, lockpicks, gloves, a thermal monocular, and a folded note. Try not to start a war, unless you're ready to finish it. He burned the note after memorizing it. The war had already begun. The enforcer lived on the outskirts of town in a rundown duplex, decorated in Marine Corps memorabilia and dust. David surveilled him for 4 days: routine gym runs, late night, beers at a bar where the bartender never asked questions, and private shooting sessions at an abandoned quarry. McVeigh was isolated. Predictable. David followed from a distance, watched how the man checked his rearview mirror too often, how he parked at angles that gave him line of sight on exits. The paranoia of a man who'd done too much dirt to ever relax. The CIA taught David how to study body language like music, movement a note, each twitch a chord. McVeigh was a symphony of violence waiting to erupt, but David didn't want violence. Not yet. He needed a confession. Something admissible, or at the very least, undeniable. So he set a trap. Using an encrypted voice modulator, he called McVeigh from a burner line. Hey Mike, the altered voice said, you left a mess. You should have buried it deeper. Silence. Then, who the hell is this? You know who I am. You killed a cop. Now it's your turn. Click. Paranoia is a weapon. 3 days later, David broke into McVeigh's house while he was out, planted a bug in the smoke detector, and waited. He listened for hours. Then it came: McVeigh, muttering into his burner phone. If someone talks, if she left something, we're dead. I told Daniels this would happen. We should have buried the husband too. David stopped the recording. That was enough. He waited. One more night, then followed McVeigh to the quarry. The first kill, David wore black gloves, a mask. Old instincts had returned, like muscle memory. But he was older now, slower. He waited until McVeigh finished firing into rusted cans and beer bottles, then approached from behind, stepping softly on broken gravel. Don't move. McVeigh froze. You got one chance to answer me, David said. Why'd you do it? McVeigh turned slowly, gun still in hand. I don't talk to ghosts, he spat. David fired. The shot hit McVeigh in the stomach, not the head, not the heart. Instinct should have made it clean, efficient, but at DIDN single quotes did McVeigh fell, clutching his gut, groaning like an animal. David stared down at him, hands trembling. This wasn't what he'd planned. McVeigh tried to lift his pistol. David stepped forward and shot again, this time in the chest. The sound echoed through the quarry like thunder in a coffin. He stood over the body, breathing heavy, heart pounding. It was messy, loud, emotional, not what Maya would have wanted, but it was done, and there was no going back. Back at home, David sat in the shower for an hour, fully clothed, letting the hot water scald his skin. The blood had washed off. The guilt hadn't. He opened the bottle again, not to numb the pain this time, but to feel it, because the pain was the only thing keeping him from becoming the monster they already believed he was. Now the game changed. The first domino had fallen, and David knew the others would feel it. Began watching Rourke more closely. The man was twitchier than ever, always on his phone, visiting his sick son more often, driving fast, locking his car 3 times before walking away. David didn't just watch him, he watched his family. It made him sick, because unlike McVeigh, Rourke was still holding on to something human, something desperate, and that raised a question David didn't want to answer. Was this justice, or was he becoming a butcher? He followed Rourke to the hospital one evening, sitting 3 rows behind in the children's cancer ward. He watched the man cradle his sleeping son, forehead pressed against his tiny shoulder. This wasn't a killer. But then he remembered Maya, her voice, her blood, her body, and he remembered the voicemail. You'll end up next to her. He wanted to scream. Instead, he left. He wasn't ready for Rourke, not yet. At night, David talked to Maya's photo, like she could still hear him. Do you hate me now? He whispered. You were the light, and I'm drowning in shadows. He pulled out the flash drive again, watched her last message. Every time it chipped away at his resolve, then hardened it. She'd asked for truth. He was delivering retribution. Somewhere between those lines, he hoped the scales balanced. He created a new objective. No more blood without a confession. Each man had to speak, had to own it. If they didn't, then they died knowing someone saw through the lies. David left a note on Rourke's windshield the next morning. Your sins are bleeding. You have one chance to speak, or the next visit won't be silent. He didn't know if it was justice, but it felt like control, and control was all he had left. Rourke didn't show up for work the day after David left the note on his windshield. He filed a sudden leave of absence, cited stress, family emergency. No one questioned it, at least not officially, but whispers rippled through the precinct. McVeigh's body had turned up 2 nights earlier, face down in the gravel pit, ruled a hunting accident, closed in. 48 hours. No press, no scrutiny. Just silence. The kind that reeks of fear, but someone was listening. Agent Lucien Hart had a reputation for being both meticulous and relentless. The kind of man who ironed his shirts 3 times and recorded every conversation, twice. David first noticed the heat in the airwaves when one of his police scanners picked up an encrypted conversation between precinct command and IAHQ terms, like internal review, excessive connections, and pattern escalation. But it wasn't about Maya, it wasn't about her death, or the corruption, it was about him. Someone inside the department had raised a red flag, not because the killers were being hunted, but because the killers were being picked off. That same afternoon, David got a text from an old friend. Meet me diner back booth, alone. He hesitated for 20 minutes before going. The voice in his head, the one he'd kept locked up since Olivia told him it was a trap, but the name on the text was Detective Marcus Reed, the only man in Maya's department she ever trusted without hesitation. David slid into the booth, hood up, face down. Reed didn't smile. He looked thinner, older, tired in the eyes. I shouldn't be here, Reed said quietly, stirring his coffee. I've got 2 IA agents parked outside my apartment and a captain pretending not to know. Why? David said nothing. You think you're invisible, but you're not. I don't care, David replied flatly. You should. You killed McVeigh. A pause. A slight shift in David's eyes. I didn't pull the trigger, but you made sure it happened. David looked up. He killed Maya. I know, Reed whispered, voice raw. I knew, but knowing doesn't make evidence. She was building a case, but it wasn't done. She was alone. You know how this city works. I do now. Reed exhaled. You're pushing against a machine that doesn't break. It swallows people like you. David leaned forward. I'm not afraid of the machine. Reed looked away. You should be. It doesn't care about truth, only optics. Silence settled between them, then Reed slid an envelope across the table. They're erasing her. Her case files, her badge reports, her digital logs, they're scrubbing it all, like she never existed. I saved what I could, but it's not much. David clenched the envelope. Why are you helping me? Because she was the only good thing left in that precinct. Reed's voice cracked. And they broke her. He stood. But listen to me, David. This thing you're doing, it won't end the way you think. David looked up. No, it won't. By the next week, Brennan was on the news, not for corruption, for heroism. A staged photo op showed him shaking hands with a city council member, standing beside a recovered drug stash. An operation David knew was fabricated. The headline read, Detective Curtis Brennan disrupts multi-state trafficking network. David nearly punched through the screen. Death had already been forgotten, framed as a tragic misfire during a solo hunting trip, a respected vet's last mistake. The world had already moved on, but David hadn't. He returned to Maya's old precinct disguised in plain clothes. Hat pulled low, false mustache, gray-streaked beard. He walked through the lobby like a ghost. Among the living, the receptionist didn't even glance up. He reached the archive wing by following a janitor through a service hallway. The badge access door was cracked. Inside, rows of steel cabinets and blinking servers lined the space like a graveyard of forgotten justice. He found her name, or tried to. Jackson, Maya, e-file, not found. He entered her badge number, her employee ID, her case codes. Nothing. Gone. He opened one of the locked drawers using a torsion wrench and rake pick. Inside, blank forms, empty folders, redacted summaries. They had purged her, erased her digital signature, as if she never wore the badge. Suddenly, a voice behind him, "You shouldn't be here." He turned, already reaching. It was Lena Brooks, Maya's protege, the one she'd trusted, the one she'd confided in. David lowered his hand. Lena, her expression wasn't fear, it was shame. "I told them you might come," she said quietly. "I didn't know what else to do. You were the last person she trusted." "I know." He stepped closer. "Did you tell them everything?" "No," she said. "But I told Daniels. I thought if I warned him, he'd protect me." David's heart turned to iron. "He's the one who gave the order," he growled. Lena's eyes filled. "I didn't know. I didn't want this. You didn't want the truth," he snapped. "You wanted to stay safe." She stepped back. "David, you have to stop. They're watching everything now. They'll catch you." "I hope they do," he said. "Because I'm done hiding." He brushed past her envelope from Reed clutched tight in one hand, almost caught that night. He returned to the rented garage where he'd been stashing his surveillance gear, blueprints, and audio files. The lock was broken. Inside, everything was gone. Files, drives, notes, surveillance logs, all gone. But in the center of the floor sat a small white envelope inside, a single Polaroid. Him, at the cemetery, standing over Maya's grave. On the back, written in sharp red ink, "Next time we dig 2 holes." David crushed the photo in his fist. They were close, closer than he'd thought. They weren't trying to stop him anymore. They were playing with him. Daniels on the rise 2 days later. Daniels was appointed deputy chief of operations. The mayor called it a testament to exemplary service. Brennan led the press conference. Rourke was nowhere to be seen. David watched it from an abandoned motel off the highway. Gun on the table, eyes burning. The system hadn't just resisted him, it had mocked him, buried Maya's name, promoted her executioner. But David had one thing left. The recording of McVeigh, the note from Rourke, the files read salvaged, and a growing list of names, civilians, cops, informants who had disappeared over the last 4 years, all connected. He pinned it across the motel wall like a murder board. Lines connecting dates, faces, precincts. The pattern was no longer vague. It was a blueprint of institutional rot. And at the center of it, Jack Daniels. David stood in front of the mirror, stared into eyes that once belonged to a protector. Now they belonged to something else, something broken, something relentless. The man who lost his wife was gone. In his place stood something colder, not a hero. Not yet a monster, something in between. The war was no longer against 4 men, it was against the illusion of justice itself. And the system had just drawn first blood. The air was heavy, thick with summer heat, and something darker inevitable. David stood across the street from the 4th Precinct headquarters, dressed in black from collar to boot. Not tactical, not showy, just quiet, focused. It was the same building where Maya once walked with pride, wearing her badge like a shield. Now it was a fortress of lies, and inside, at the top floor in a glass office overlooking the city he betrayed, Jack Daniels sat behind a desk lined with plaques, medals, and the photo of a wife he left years ago, a man made of charm and rot. 1047. P.M. David used a side entrance, an old fire escape he had mapped years ago when he visited Maya during her shifts. The security system was top tier, but even top tier systems had blind spots. He found them all. Inside, the halls were empty, the lights on motion sensors. Shadows flickered with every step. He moved like memory, like muscle memory trained in war zones. Every creak, every vibration in the floorboards calculated. He carried no rifle, no armor, just a Glock, a phone, and a body worn thin by grief. Top floor executive wing. Daniels' office was lit. Of course it was. David stepped in without knocking. Daniels looked up, unshaken. The bastard even smiled. "Well," he said, leaning back in his chair, "I was wondering when you'd stop playing hide and seek." David didn't speak. He closed the door behind him, locking it. Daniels gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Sit, let's talk. Civilized men, yeah, David didn't move. His hand hovered over the phone in his pocket, already recording. Every word mattered now. You killed my wife, he said flatly. Daniels smiled wider. That's a strong accusation, David. You sure grief isn't making you see ghosts? I saw the footage. Heard McVeigh's confession. I have everything. Then what are you doing here? Daniels asked. You want a confession? You want closure? David stepped forward. I want the truth. Daniels stood, slow and calm, walking around the desk. You want the truth? Fine. He dropped the smile. Your wife was a problem. She couldn't play the game, couldn't shut up. She thought the system worked because of honesty. He chuckled. But the system works because of control. Because people like me know when to bend rules, when to break them. David's fingers, clenched around the grip of his pistol, Daniels kept circling him. She found a crack in the wall. He continued. Started picking at it. I warned her. Hell, I had Brennan talk to her, twice. But she kept digging, and when you dig too deep, you bury yourself. David finished. Daniels nodded. Exactly. Silence. Then David pulled the phone from his pocket and tossed it onto the desk. The screen was still glowing, the red recording light blinking. Daniels laughed. You think that matters? He said. You think anyone's going to believe it? You're a fugitive, a killer. McVeigh's dead. Brennan's missing, Rourke disappeared. You're the story now. I don't care about the story, David growled. I care about making sure you never hurt anyone again. Daniels stepped closer. So what now? You're going to kill me, like them? David raised the gun. His hands were steady, but his heart was not. Maya at the breakfast table laughing at his overcooked eggs. Maya sitting cross-legged on the couch, reading case files late into the night. Maya looking him in the eye and saying, We don't fight fire with fire, David. We shine light. He could end it now. One shot. End of story. But what would that make him? Daniels took a step forward. Do it, he whispered. That's what this is about, right? You think you're some vigilante hero, but you're just like us. You killed to silence your pain. David hesitated. 1 second too long. Daniels lunged. The gun went off once. Twice. Chaos in a confined space. David stumbled back, hitting the wall. Daniels tackled him, fist slamming into his ribs, elbow to his face. David responded with a knee to the gut, a punch to the throat. The fight was brutal. No choreography, no mercy, just pain, sweat, breath, and blood. They crashed into the desk, shattering a photo frame. Daniels reached for the gun, kicked it away, then grabbed a letter opener and slashed at David's arm. David screamed, grabbed a lamp, and smashed it across Daniels' head. Daniels dropped, gasping, both men bloodied, bruised, wheezing like animals. David crawled to the gun, picked it up. Stood over him. Daniels sat up against the wall, laughing through bloodied lips. This is who you are, he said. You pretend to be righteous, but you're just a killer with better marketing. David raised the gun. Say her name. Daniels sneered. Why, she's dead. You're next. David pulled the trigger. Click. Empty. Both men froze. David hadn't realized it. Somewhere between the struggle and hesitation, the magazine had emptied. Daniels smiled, but David didn't flinch. He pulled the phone from the desk and pressed send. The recording uploaded encrypted to 5 sources, an extra 2 watchdog groups, a legal aid network, and 1 remaining friend at the Attorney General's office. Checkmate, David whispered. Daniels lunged again, but this time, David was ready. He slammed him back against the glass window. They struggled, hands at each other's throats, until Daniels' foot slipped. The glass cracked. A second later, it shattered. Daniels fell, screaming. His body hit the squad car parked below with a sickening crunch. Officers came running, sirens, yells. David stood alone at the edge of the broken window, blood dripping down his face, his gun empty, his soul not far behind. Later that night he sat in the back of a stolen car, parked near the river. The confession had already gone viral. Daniels' corruption, McVeigh's involvement, Brennan's financials, Rourke's missing persons trail, all of it exposed. News anchors scrambled to reframe their narratives. IA issued a statement. The mayor went silent. Red called once. You did it? He said. No, David replied. I just showed them what was already there. Red was quiet. Then, they'll still come for you. I know. Where will you go? David stared at the water, eyes blank. Nowhere. At sunrise, David returned to the cemetery. The same spot, the same headstone. He placed a folded newspaper at the base. The headline read, Hero Cop Exposes Ring of Corruption. Deputy Chief Dead After Confrontation. He knelt. Maya, he whispered, voice breaking. I didn't do it the right way, not all of it, but the truth's out now. They know. They can't pretend anymore. He paused. I think I lost myself somewhere along the way, but I found you again in the light. A breeze passed through the trees. He stood one last time, no disguise, no armor, just a man, walking away from the war and into whatever came next. 3 days after Jack Daniels fell to his death, the city was no longer the same. Sirens still wailed, traffic still honked, the heartbeat of a tired metropolis still throbbed under the surface, but the illusion of justice had ruptured. News outlets scrambled to regain control of the narrative. For 48 hours, the top headline on every screen, every phone, every television, was the same: corruption exposed, high-ranking officers implicated in years of misconduct and murder. Maya Jackson's name was no longer buried under silence, it was shouted from rooftops. Her photo appeared on screens, in candlelight vigils, across social media feeds with hashtags like #JusticeForMaya and #TheSystemFailedHer. The confession Daniels Gav recorded in his own voice, with his own arrogance, like wildfire. It was undeniable, his words, his pride, his guilt, broadcast to the world like a curse finally spoken aloud. Curtis Brennan was arrested at his home in a gated community, his house surrounded by reporters before sunrise. His lawyers claimed entrapment. The files on his hard drive said otherwise. Daniel Rourke, already on the run, was found in a motel outside Tucson, a gun under his pillow, his son in the next room. He surrendered without a fight. He said nothing, but the look in his eyes told the truth. He had seen the reckoning coming, and now it was here. But for David Jackson, justice came wrapped in silence. He stayed off the grid, watching the chaos unfold from the shadows. He had safe houses, fake identities, a ghost skill set, but it wasn't the law that haunted him. It was the quiet, the absence of her laugh, the missing second toothbrush, the way the world kept spinning like it hadn't collapsed just weeks before. They called him many things in the aftermath: the vigilante of the 4th Precinct, the ghost of justice, the man who dared to burn the blue wall down. Some saw a hero, others saw a threat. Neither version mattered to him, because none of it brought Maya back. He returned to her grave one last time, this time no rain, just sunlight filtering through the trees. The cemetery was quiet. Fresh flowers from strangers covered her headstone. Cards, candles, notes from people she never met but whose lives she now touched. He stood there, motionless, for what felt like hours. Then he knelt, pressing his palm to the ground above her. "I kept my promise," he whispered. "I didn't walk away. I didn't let them win." His voice cracked. "But I didn't do it the way you would have wanted. I tried, Maya. I tried to hold on to the light. But the darkness, it was louder." A tear slid down his cheek. "They know your name now. They can't bury you again." He reached into his coat and pulled out the badge. Her badge cleaned, polished, unbroken. He laid it gently on the grass. "You were always the better cop." Silence followed, the kind that stretched beyond sound into memory, into soul, as he walked back toward the gates. He passed a small girl and her mother, placing flowers on another grave. The girl looked up at him, curious. "Are you the man who helped the good cop?" David paused. For a moment, he didn't know how to answer. He looked down at her and saw something in her eyes: innocence, untouched by the system's rot. "I knew her," he said softly. "She saved more people than she ever know." The girl smiled. "My mom says she was a hero." "She was," he whispered. Then he kept walking. 1 week later, a closed-door trial convicted Brennan. Rourke took a plea deal in exchange for a full confession. The city launched an internal overhaul, and federal oversight descended like hawks. But institutions are slow to bleed out, and ghosts are hard to prosecute. David watched it all from the rooftop of a crumbling apartment building, hidden behind the skyline. He saw Reed speaking to the press, heard Maya's name spoken with honor, with reverence, but the applause didn't reach him, because the victory came at the price of his humanity. He hadn't just avenged Maya, he had unraveled himself in the process. Every life he took, every line he crossed, chipped away at the man she loved, the man she believed in. He wasn't that man anymore. He packed light, one duffel cache, tools, a single photograph of them together, folded and creased at the edges. He left no note, no goodbye, just a voicemail to Reed. "Don't come looking for me. The war's over, and I'm not built for peace. Keep her name alive. That's all that matters now." David walked down a highway as dawn broke behind him. Cars flying past, unaware of the man drifting into the horizon. A free man, a haunted man. A man who had burned down a corrupt world to honor the woman who believed it could be better. And though justice had been served, its taste was bitter. He didn't know where he was going. Didn't care. The only thing that mattered was this: Maya's truth had survived. And now, so would the people who came after her. He vanished into the morning light. not as a hero, not as a villain, but as a man who once loved a woman brave enough to fight the system, and who dared to finish what she started.